So today's parsha is Vayigash, and the first thing I'd like to do is to talk about the verse where Joseph tells his brothers not to be sad. And after we talk about the verse where Joseph tells his brothers not to be sad, I want to talk about the verse where it says that the son of Dan was Chushim. And then after that, I want to talk about the Dudai Ruvain, where he talks about how Yaakov Avinu was reciting the Shema for the first time. When he was reciting Shema when he sees Joseph. Excuse me. So if we have time after that, there's a lot more to discuss on this incredibly powerful parsha, incredibly beautiful parsha. But first, I want to talk about the verse where Joseph tells his brothers not to be sad, and because there's a beautiful lesson about it that I saw from the Alter Rebbe. And I always want to say a teaching from the Alter Rebbe because the Alter Rebbe's Yortzeit is coming up in Teves, Chof Dalet Teves, the 24th of Teves. Who is the Alter Rebbe? Reb Shneur Zalman of Liadi, the author of the Baal Tanya. So, the author of the Tanya, the author of the Shulchan Aruch Harav. So I want to share this story. So first, because this is a story that we can all take to heart. Some of these stories are believable, some are not believable. You hear stories, Hasidic stories, God should help me, but sometimes you roll your eyes and you're like, oh, Baba Maisa, but sometimes it's just cuts you straight to your soul. So first, let me just look at the verse that they're commenting on, chapter 45, verse 5. It states, V'ata al teyatzvu. He says, now, do not be sad. And let this not be angry in your eyes. Ki mechartem otihena. Because the fact that you sold me here. So Joseph tells his brothers, after he reveals himself, he says, listen, don't be upset. Don't be upset that you sold me here. Don't be sad. Don't be angry, because you sent me here for whatever reason, but Hashem sent me for a purpose. Hashem sent me as a supporter of life. So that's what the pasuk said. So the verse that it says is V'atal teyatzvu. It says, don't be upset, don't be sad. Easier said than done, of course. Of course, easier said than done. What's one of the most important keys to not being sad? This is something that I do for myself when I'm feeling anxious or sad, is we have to count the reasons to be grateful, express our gratitude to Hashem. Very important. And be as specific as possible. And then when you do that, usually you'll find there's just so many things to be grateful for that it overwhelms the reason why you're anxious or sad. But there's a following story that's told about the Alter Rebbe that I wanted to share with everybody. So there was a merchant whose name was Zalman Senders. His name was Zalman. I want to share with you that yesterday I called my friend Zalman Chaskalovich. I met him when we went to Saudi Arabia. He was the mashgiach who made sure the food in the hotel was kosher. And I just called him yesterday to schmooze, say hello to Zalman. And Zalman said to me, oh, I'm right now going to the Alter Rebbe's kever. I'm going to his grave. It's in Hadich. Alter Rebbe's kever is in Hadich. So I said, put in a good word for us there. Daven for the Chayalim, for the Shvuyim, for the soldiers, for the captives. davened that they should be safe, released speedily from captivity. And he said for sure he would do that. Anyway, so the story is that Zalman Sanders was a very, very successful merchant from the town of Shklov. I don't know if anybody here knows where Shklov is. I'm not sure, but we can figure it out. But even though he had made a lot of money, he lost all his wealth through some failed business moves. And now he had gone in a short period of time from being very, very successful businessman to being in debt to his former business associates. To make the situation worse, of course, when it all fails, it all fails. He had promised when he was doing well certain chasadim. He had promised certain things to do. He thought he'd be able to do certain things. He thought he'd marry off his daughters. He had promised to marry off their poor girls in town. And he promised to pay for their weddings. But now he couldn't even afford to pay off his own two daughters' wedding. So he was so sad, so upset. So he goes to Reb Shneur Zalman of Liadi, because he was a chassid, goes to the Alter Rebbe, and he said, listen, if this is what Shemayim says, and I have to be a pauper, I accept it. He said, but if I don't pay off my debts, if I don't fulfill my pledge to marry off these girls, if I can't afford to make weddings for my own daughters, then isn't this a chilul Hashem? Isn't this a desecration of Hashem's name? And why is Hashem punishing me? Why is Hashem punishing me? It's going to make a chilul Hashem. I ask only, he says, all I ask is that Hashem enable me to pay back my debts and my promises. Once I do that, then if it's destined from heaven that I live in poverty, I will not doubt the wisdom of Hashem. Then he opened up his heart and he cried out and he said, Rebbe, I need to pay off my debts. I need to marry off these girls who I pledged that I'm going to marry them off. And he started saying, Rebbe, I need to do this. And at this time, the Alter Rebbe looked at him. This is the reason why I'm telling you this story, because this really cut me straight to my soul. He said, the Alter Rebbe looked at him and said, I hear you talking about what you need. I don't hear you expressing any interest in knowing what you are needed for. I'm going to say that again because to me it had a big impact. The Rebbe said, I hear you talking about what you need. I don't hear you talking about wanting to know what you're needed for. So these words struck the man's heart like an arrow, and he fainted. The Hasidim who were in the other room rushed in. They picked him up. When the Zalman woke up, he was a new man. Forgot about all his worries. He remained with the Alter Rebbe, devoted himself to finding his niche. He was praying, he was studying, he never missed a shiur, and everybody could see that when he was studying, he was just rejoicing like crazy in the performance of the mitzvah. That Shabbos, Reb Shneur Zalman basically did extra prayers, and so a few days later, the Rebbe told Zalman, go back to your home, and he says, I feel like Hashem is going to bless you. And as soon as he came home, his whole fortune turned around, and he now all of a sudden became he was able to pay off his debts, and he was able to thrive financially. So about this man, Zalman Sanders, the Alter Rebbe cited a passage from the Tanya, which was what he wrote, said, when one is in any case troubled by mundane worries, that's the appropriate time to transform the sadness by becoming one of the masters of account, to act on the counsel of the sages constantly to excite the good inclination against the evil inclination. Thereby he will rid himself of the dejection occasioned by mundane affairs. And following this, he will attain true joy. The way to attain true joy, basically, what the message to me is, don't focus on what you need, focus on where you are needed. And that's what Yosef was also saying. He's saying, don't be sad. This is where I was needed. I was needed here. Hashem Yisbarach knew I was needed here in Egypt. So if any one of us is feeling lost, especially during this very difficult time for the world, for the Jewish people, focus on where you can make a difference. That's to me the message of this story. Okay, so now we share that story. As I promised, I have a second story, but in order to look at the second story, I want to first read the pasuk. And the pasuk comes from chapter 46, verse 23. Now, you'll be excused if you don't know that pasuk. Okay, hold on one second. Let me just stop this recording for a second.